David raises his eyebrows and looks at the floor before saying, "But don't you think love and compassion will win out in the end, even if things do get pretty dark? I mean, where I work, people are generally pretty caring, I'd say." He laughs at a sentimental view. "No one is trained," I say, "to handle the pandemonium of information available to us. I had to train myself." "How?" he asks. He's standing behind me at the door of my study, which is the size of a walk-in closet. I must turn my head to see him. I say, "By taking in random information and unconsciously weighing it all." Rachel walks into my study. "Listen to this, Mommy, Daddy. This frog can scream." "Ah!" "Was that a frog?" I ask. "Yes." "Huh. You want to hear a chimpanzee scream?" she asks. "Okay." "Ah!" David walks away while removing the headband of his earphones from around his neck and placing the padded speakers over his ears. Our 13-year-old daughter finds things on her phone of special interest to share with us. I ask her, "Do you have any schoolwork?" "No. Well, maybe a little," she says, "but I can do it tomorrow." "When is it due?" "By midnight. Don't give me that look. I'll do it." She shuffles out of the room looking dejected, and I want to call her. "No, you don't have to do any homework. You can just hang with your mom." But I need her to learn to delay gratification until she finishes her required tasks. Or at least, that's what I think is necessary for a future, whatever that might be. If you're like me, you don't have any in-person friends. With all the people on social media, there should be a large variety of individuals. But if people can find a lot of other people who think like them, they will have little tolerance for someone like me. I can understand that. I don't want to feel terribly different. Here she comes again. "Mommy, I found another one." She puts her hand on my forearm. "Do you want to hear a fish scream?" "Okay." "Ah!" "Didn't you say that your daddy used a car jack to fix the bathtub drain?" "Yes, I helped him. I turned the handle." "Did it work?" "You know, I told him to try a car jack. It has a lot of force that can be used for odd jobs that you wouldn't expect it to apply to." I remember her homework and give her a stern look. She says, "Okay, I'm going to do my schoolwork now." "Good." I know that my existence isn't what I deserve given my efforts compared to others. That's obvious to me. It's like mortality, but maybe even more troubling than the inevitability of death, since poor judgment can affect my whole life. The whole purpose of a belief in God would be to pretend that we're not under the influence of the poor judgment that leaves us feeling disregarded. God offers the delusion that there's someone watching over us who will judge us fairly, like if some super AI watched over us, judging us using exponentially more factors than we can hold in mind. Language coerces me to shape my thoughts to its limitations. I feel that all the time. There are thoughts that can't be contained within our language and our limited memory. "What are you writing?" Rachel asks. I don't know. Are you finished with your schoolwork?" "Yes." "That was quick." I feel I should check her work, but I want her to learn to manage her schoolwork by herself. Rachel is looking at her phone. I feel the impulse to snatch it out of her hand, but I smile instead, and she leaves. When David told me that he was having Murray on his podcast, I couldn't say anything. I just walked into my study and closed the door behind me. He followed and knocked before opening the door. "I know you don't like him." I opened my laptop and turned it on while considering an answer. Then I turned to David. His whole career is founded on combing news feeds to find desperate people of the opposition who did something stupid so we can laugh at them during some interview. I mean, you think people are basically good, right? He looks at me. "You say that often enough on your podcast." "I do," he says. "But didn't you tell me that you click on nut pickers yourself for fun?" "I do, sometimes, yes," I said. "But I don't listen to people like Murray anymore. I only did it to learn the arguments of people who I dislike, their smartest arguments, not things I can laugh at. Murray beams with pride while making someone he doesn't like look stupid. I think he can only get away with it because he has a network of podcaster friends who also want to appear exceptionally smart. Do you mean me? He smiles uncomfortably. You love all your friends with special talents that set them apart from everyone else. And that's like Murray. I can see surprise and hurt in his eyes. He walks away. I follow him. Do it if you want. He turns. You make it sound like a conspiracy. Well, I say, it is kind of like one if it involves a small number of self-proclaimed geniuses and they're filling that role with their friends. What role? He asks. The adults in the room, I say. I know that's not what you're trying to do. I know that's not what most of your guests are trying to do. But you bring all these smart people, mostly tech guys, and then you add someone like Murray and he's going to be included as an intellectual. But he's not. He's a nut-picking journalist. You can have him on, but you can't have me on. Is that? No. Because, no. Rachel comes in. Are you fighting? We're not fighting, I say. What are you doing? David asks her. She looks from him to me. Did you find any more screaming animals? I ask her. She looks at David, then back at me, before saying, I found an insect that screams. We wait for her to find it on her phone. It seems to take forever. And then she plays it. It looks like a grasshopper. It goes, ah! You know that's not real, I say. It's got a human mouth. I know, she says. She walks away. If I don't have him on, he begins, then stops to think about that. His millions of fans eat it up when he tells them how his views are being suppressed. Millions? I don't know a lot. I don't think it has to go in the direction you're worried about, David says. I think we can have, I don't know, a more generous conversation. That's what you want, right? I hope. I can't guarantee when talking about another person, but I would be aiming for a more rigorous conversation. I've done over 100 interviews. I mean, don't you think? That's crazy when I think about it. What I think, I say, is this. If you look on YouTube, doesn't it seem like there's very little intelligence in the world? I'm not saying there's anything you can do about it. Do about what exactly? People tend to want the world to be reduced to familiar faces for them, like people who pick movies because of who the lead actor is. I know what you mean. Do you? A small group of movie stars represent all of humanity, and a small group of intellectuals can represent all the intelligence in the world. And it's familiar, you're saying, but it's not representative. That reminds me of the saying that the only accurate representation of the universe is the universe. You can have a population that grows 10 times as big, I say, or 100 times as big, and people will still want the same number of important people, even when they become progressively out of reach. If the number of important people grow along with the bigger population, we have to accept that we can't know ahead of time what all the smart people out there will think of our choices. Right. I don't tell David that he's like Murray in his great admiration for a small number of intellectual stars. Rachel comes in and puts her hand on his forearm. David looks at Rachel, then at me. He looks a little scared. He tells me, maybe I could have you on. I had an MMA fighter on last week. I'm not an MMA fighter. He looks at the ground. He is doing his boyish smile. Does he know he's doing it? Rachel walks away with her phone. Did I pressure David to have me on his podcast? He's had his own neuroscientist father on, for fuck's sake. He didn't bring the subject up again, and I think he would rather drop it. And anyway, I don't like a lot of attention. It's rather painful. There are more people where I'm not looking than where I am, and I can't predict what any of them will think. That includes a lot of fear of the unknown and a lot of promise. Rachel takes tests online for school that won't accept a synonym she chose for the answer. It's sick for test makers to make language more limited by insisting on their particular word, as opposed to a synonym that should be equally valid. It tells these kids that you can't find your own solutions. It tells them that you can't use a car jack for anything but changing a tire. That's why I suggested to David that he use a car jack when he decided to fix the drain himself. and couldn't turn the old bathtub drain out by hand. It wasn't just that I thought it might work. I thought it would be a nice surprise if it did work. A positive example of what we can do if things aren't kept in their proper place. I don't seem to have a place, which feels hopeless,